The Aquest Podcast, Funds Industry Conversations.
Hello, podcast listeners, and welcome to this episode of the Aquest Podcast with me, Danny Lawler. If you're new to the Aquest Podcast, do hit like and subscribe, and feel free to share with your friends too. Now, as long-term listeners to the Aquest Podcast will probably know, many of our episodes focus on topics that are of a technical, regulatory, compliance type nature for the funds industry. But occasionally we do have episodes that are a little bit more left field, and this is one of those. So my guest for this episode is Shannon Eastman. Shannon is a long-time friend and collaborator on the Aquest Podcast, but we haven't had her on the show in a little while, and in that period in between, she spent her time studying neuroscience and working on a new concept that her and her collaborators are calling the nervous system intelligence. I guess the best way I can describe it is it's investigating how the nervous system kind of suffers where an individual has been exposed to stress over a long period of time. And then it looks at the kinds of steps that can be taken to try and repair some harm. So for our conversation, Shannon explains all of this in much better detail than I can, and takes us into some of the detail of what's involved and how it manifests, and what are those steps that can be taken, and where you can find out a little bit more if you're interested. So on that note, let's get on with the show.
The Aquest Podcast, Funds Industry Conversations.
Hello, Shannon. It's so good to have you back on the podcast.
It's been ages, Danny. How have you been?
I've been great. It's been such a busy few years since we chatted last for me.
I know, and I've missed you. I've missed you.
Mostly when somebody comes back on the podcast, we kind of pick up on a theme that we've chatted about before, and it's whatever it is, legal, technical stuff. But for you, things have been more different since our last podcast to today than for most. So tell us, what have you been up to?
Well, for the last 5 years, I have been studying neuroscience and nervous system and neurobiology as it relates to performance in the workplace.
Why on earth would you do that?
Well, I think it's an extension of human behavior understanding. So I've always been working in human behavior. Sure, we did a lot together with preparing people to meet the regulator. And I always remember what you used to say, it's not about what you can, it's about what you should do. So I guess I see this as an extension of deepening my understanding of that area, but particularly as it relates in the business world.
So let's just dig into that a bit deeper. So you obviously always had this interest in human behavior, and now as you kind of deepen that knowledge and it takes you into neuroscience, how does that connect?
Well, I guess I would say that 80% of our situation, regardless of whether it's good, bad, or otherwise, 80% of our situation and 80% of our solution to change our situation is found with and through the nervous system.
Okay.
The nervous system is really the organizing principle. Yeah, I guess that's how I'd say it. I must send you this PDF in case anyone's interested, that maps the mind-body science field. And there's 13 different sciences. I won't bore you with the details. But as you look at this mind-body science field, you can see that there's an organizing principle that emerges from this field, which is nervous system intelligence. So everything kind of moves around through or is because of nervous system. So not just the cognitive, but the felt sense in the body as well, which we now know is the nervous system's way to communicate with us. Does that make sense, Danny?
It does, and we'll jump into that a little bit more, but I remember we chatted before, and one of the things that kind of sparked your interest in knowing more about neuroscience and the route that you've gone down was this study that showed the brain patterns of, I think it was two kids, one that's called normal, and then one who'd been in a very stressful family situation, and there was a huge difference in the brain activity in both.
Yeah, that was 2019. That would have changed the entire trajectory of my life. Actually, that's why I'm here today. So it was Dr. Gabor Mate, if you're familiar with him. He was doing a webinar, and on the screen came two brain scans. And they were both of 5-year-old children. And one of the brain scans was representing the child who came from a very loving and supported home. And the other child was a home of neglect. And what struck me in that moment was that the brain scan from the child who had a much more stressful go at life was 30% smaller in size and had 40% less function. And now if you were to consider that that child grows up, goes to school, does their leaving cert, goes out into the world, gets a job, they're operating from an entirely different experience, nervous system, neurobiology than most of their peers, at least a good few of their peers. And if you don't know that, then the world can be a really challenging place to navigate.
And so then if you think about, let's move that person or another person forward into the business world, and maybe they're a senior executive or a senior lawyer or a senior person in their organization that's under, listen, those roles are tough.
They're tough.
That, and there's a lot demanded of you if you are carrying out one of those kind of senior executive roles. That does put a lot of stress on you, demands on your time, demands on your energy, does put a lot of stress on you and your resources. So have you sensed for then what the brain scan of your senior executives might look like?
They're on par to people who've just come back from war.
Wow.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that, because that was what I said. I was like, wait, what? They're like, that's the CEO brain scan. And that's someone who just did a tour. Yeah. And they're the same.
And they're the same.
Within 5 or 10% difference here, but it would be very hard for a layman like myself. I've only been in this field for 5 years. And while that could be a long time, it's also a nanosecond. But I would look at those and struggle to differentiate which was which, because they were so similar. Yeah.
And so just following on from that then, so if you are an individual or somebody who's operating with that amount of stress and it has that impact on your brain function, how does that play out then? What does that look like in day-to-day life?
Well, so there's so much to say here, but let me say it this way. If your nervous system has chronic exposure to stress, so prolonged exposure to stress, and we have never deliberately intervened with addressing that stress, then the chances are your nervous system has caught itself up in a loop of, well, in the textbooks, they call it survival mode. But in work, in business, it's overreacting, it's over analysis, it's overthinking, it's overworking, it's all the overs that you can imagine. And that will only take us so far until there's either sickness in the body that compels us to stop, or unfortunately, we have a public wipeout, or we drop the ball in a way that makes the headlines. So what's happening there is when your nervous system has ongoing exposure to stress, the prefrontal cortex, to call it the adult part of the brain, it's the part of the brain that it can act like the parent, if you will. It's not important. It is secondary to everything else that the nervous system is trying to do. So it's kind of like, we have no energy or resources to give to the prefrontal cortex, guys. Nope. So we're going to focus all of our resources over here because we are not okay. We are not getting the sleep, not getting the nutrition, not getting the exercise, the sunlight. All of these things have much bigger impact on our nervous system than any of us really appreciate or understand. And so in those situations, the parent side or the adult side of us is not available. So that is exactly why, and I'm kind of speaking from experience here now, Danny, that's exactly why the 5-year-old or the 10-year-old wiring from our childhood can interrupt and hijack our 40-year-old reality. And then we come away from that situation being like, oh my God, where did that come from? Like, why did I say that? Or how did I overreact that way? It wasn't a big deal. But what's happening is the parent part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, it's been told to shut house and go somewhere else because it's not needed. When the body perceives itself to be under so much stress, all it wants to do is survive. So we have some unfortunate outbursts, to say the least. Does that make sense?
It does. And I guess it leads to the next question, which is, well, what happens well, I guess, how do you manage that, or how do you fix that? Is it hand in a letter of resignation and go and sit on the beach in Dungarvan, or what else is to be done?
Well, I would highly recommend a beach in Dungarvan. But okay, I'm so glad you asked that, because this is what I've been mapping out with. I'd say there's about 14 of us. So there's a wee group of psychiatry, psychology, neuroscientists, organizational psychologists, psychotherapists, like neurobiologists, neurofunctional medicine. We have got all the job titles around the table. And we're answering that exact question, Danny, because the logic is, if we can have all those different perspectives from all those very different subject matter expertise, swim lanes, if you will, then we can come up with a very robust answer to that exact question. And I'll tell you where we are right now. So your nervous system, anyone's nervous system, will, and I'm going to simplify this, so allow me to simplify it, will be operating from one of three states. You're either in the red zone, the orange zone, or the blue, trying to figure out how the heck do you get to the green. So let's look at red and orange specifically, because I'd say the guts of 65% of our corporate workforce are in red and orange. So if you're looking to address the situation, it's very important to recognize that you're resolving it in a way that is nervous system state dependent. And what that means is, depending on where your nervous system is right now, let's say it's red, your way out looks very different to someone who's in the orange. And both of them will be very different to someone who's in the blue. So first and foremost, you want to understand, where is my nervous system operating from right now? And chances are it would be a safe bet for anyone in corporate, particularly lawyers and bankers, financial services, to say they're in orange. Very, very safe to say that, largely due to COVID and what we're seeing right now with regards to the stress that created in the body and has not been released from the body. So it's been stored and stress accumulates. So orange would be a good place to say your nervous system is. And if your nervous system is in the orange, then what it takes to shift this in 12 weeks, you can shift a lot. And then there's other stuff that requires a bit longer. But in 12 weeks, you can restore a level of health to the nervous system that will change your entire experience of life. That's how profound the change is. I'm going to pause there, Danny. Are you still following me?
I am, and that's a big statement. So I do want to probe that. But I guess I'm mindful. I'm talking about brain scans and brain function, and you're talking about nervous system. So nervous system is more. It's all how your senses perceive the world, I guess. So what does that mean?
Well, it turns out that everything below the neck is as important, more important than the cognitive alone. So I would have spent most of my career exploring growth mindset, mind over matter, workshops, all the cognitive stuff to fix situations and address, problems and obstacles. And what I've discovered in the last 5 years, lived experience for myself and my peer group, is that when you start engaging below the neck as part of your solution, your ability to create big change in your life in 12-week increments is far greater than what you can do with just the mind alone.
So is this what, when people talk about living too much in their head, is that what you mean?
Well, let me borrow from Einstein. Einstein says that the field is the governing agent of the particle. So let's swap out the word field for environment and the particle for the person. So the environment is the governing agent of the person. And as humans, we have two environments. We have an inner environment, which is influenced by, what we eat or drink. And we have an outer environment. In our outer environment, here's a very practical example. If I've got a big deadline to hit in 2 weeks' time, and I'm a bit stressed out about it, and things at home are a bit tough because everyone's kind of on edge because everyone's got stress that they need to sort out at work. And I come into the office on Tuesday morning, and my boss, who's not the easiest person to get on with, is having a particularly bad day. What's just happened without any words exchanged and within the first 30 seconds is something called co-dysregulation. So the stressed out nervous system of the boss and the stressed out nervous system of the employee or the team member have just interacted in a way that is exacerbating both of them more than when they were on their own. So we have this dynamic in the workplace that we can now touch and point to through machines. Nervous systems, stressed out nervous systems hanging out together creates more dysregulation. And dysregulation is how people describe a nervous system that is totally stressed out. So your environment, outer environment, plays a direct impact on your well-being, but so does your inner environment. So if you can imagine for 12 weeks, if you were to just do just two things a day, and I'm going to give you specifically what they are for someone who's in the orange state of their nervous system. For 12 weeks, there's something called, just want to pick the most neutral one. Actually, I'm going to give you a link that you can share with anyone who wants to know more about this, Danny. It's 9 ways to regulate your nervous system inside 2 minutes. 2 minutes. So if you were to do one of those 9 things for 2 minutes only, 3 times a day for 12 weeks, you would have a significant shift in your life. Significant, because what's happening is your nervous system, and again, I'm speaking specifically to a nervous system that is so stressed out, it's in the orange zone. Your nervous system is on its knees, crippled, gasping for water, so to speak. If you were to give it a sip of water 3 times a day for 12 weeks, it would be able to grow and perform and act and animate the way it's meant to. But for the last, let's say, we'll just go to COVID. For the last 3.5, 4 years, it has been completely ignored and deprived of all water in this example. It's not okay at all, but it has everything it needs to heal itself. It has everything it needs to take care of itself when it gets a bit of support from us. So I guess I would summarize it by saying, we want to think of ourselves as the thinking self, so the part of me that's talking to you right now, and our nervous system, because they're 2 very different parts of us and they want 2 very different things. The thinking self wants a solution right now, quick and fast. And I was like that. Whiteboard, colored markers, throw it all up there. We'll figure it out. Okay, let's go. But your nervous system wants micro support a couple times a day only, but consistently for about 12 weeks. That's what it wants. And if you give it what it needs, it will give you back a world of difference. The challenge is our logic, our thinking self goes, no, that's not efficient. We need to do, this is exactly what I did, Denny. I was like 2 minutes a day for 12 weeks. I was like, okay, what's 2 times 12? Okay, that's 20. That's 24. I'm going to do an hour a day and fix this in 3 weeks, which actually dysregulates the nervous system far more. Intensity and speed is very upsetting to the nervous system. So I don't want to belabor it, but I do want to reiterate that micro, slow, gentle, consistent over 12 weeks is actually the fastest way to create change, particularly if you're in the orange zone.
And what kind of things are on this list of 9 life-changing habits?
Yeah, they're things that we take for granted. And I kind of want to preempt them because I was the one who would hear these things and just be like, what are you talking about? What a load of toss. It's really my reaction to many of these things. But then, Danny, back in 2019, when I saw those 2 brain scans, that was a very important webinar for me because it came about a week after I had consciously decided that I was going to stop with all the personal development because it hadn't worked. After 15 years, it had not worked for me. And I was exhausted. So I was looking at buying a house on top of a mountain in Portugal. And I just wanted a quiet, isolated life for the next however long and good internet connection. When I came across this webinar, and it really challenged me because my first thought was, oh my God, how do I grow back brain matter? That was like, how do I grow that? And at the time, AI wasn't nearly as efficient as it was back then. So I remember Googling, how do you make your brain grow? and so that took me down a rabbit hole where I came up with these 9 things, which I'm about to share with you now. And I thought, why did I not pay attention to this sooner? And it was because I didn't connect the value. So for example, there's particular type of breath work, alternate nostril breathing, if you will. And you can Google this, it's very easy to find a YouTube video that will show you how to do alternate nostril breathing. Well, alternate nostril breathing syncs I'm going to simplify it, the left and right side of your nervous system, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. It restores it back to equilibrium. And if your nervous system is in the orange zone, your chances are, and this isn't one size fits all, but I'm just going to use a specific example. Your orange nervous system has no access to the parasympathetic side of you, because that's rest and digest and relax and easy and fun and calm. Your sympathetic, if it's anything like mine, is on steroids, punching holes through the ceiling, which is where mine was. And so I had no access to the parasympathetic. I did alternate nostril breathing morning and night for 12 weeks. And the change in my life was so profound. And I'm really grateful it was, because it's not all easy. And that transformation in my life was so inspiring to me that it kept me going through the tougher times. So it's not all a cakewalk. But I remember waking up for the first time in my life, and I wasn't sad that I was still alive. It was gone.
Wow.
And up until that point, I thought, how can I be so conflicted emotionally and mentally when I'm so functioning at work? Like, I'm so on and I love it. And when I'm at work, things are amazing. But the truth is, when I left work and had to be on my own, there would be a bottle of whiskey at home and sleeping pills, because I couldn't function without them. And you'll find that that's actually not unique to me. That's very, very common in the corporate sector, in particular, addiction anyway, not necessarily whiskey, Jameson, if you will. So I did this. I couldn't believe it. And I'll tell you what happened to me, Danny. Not only did I woke up that morning, and I've never known life without that feeling. So I've always had to work through it and had this little routine to get me going in the morning, and it was gone. And I was like, well, I'm tearfully grateful, because holy crap, life is so hard when it's like that. But I was furious. I was so angry that information that is so fundamental to our quality of life and so easy was so inaccessible. I couldn't believe it. And I remember saying to my friends and my partner, I was like, breath work? Are you kidding me? That's what this, I've spent hundreds of thousands over 15 years trying to make that internal conflict go away, or at least feel smaller, and nothing.
Yeah.
Do this. Okay. So I'll get to the point of these 9, but I felt like I need to preempt it, because God forbid you hear these and just roll your eyes like I did for 15 years.
So before we get into the 9, then is this, because obviously there's a much greater focus on wellness, right? And a lot of firms and professional service firms and the rest will have wellness weeks, and they will, they do some better than others, but they do acknowledge and try to make an effort in terms of focusing on wellness and how that can help people. But is this now what you're talking about? Is that kind of an extension of that, in terms of maybe bringing a scientific explanation for why doing the wellness stuff actually has a very provable benefit, as opposed to maybe a sense that it seems like it does good, so let's do it, as opposed to a scientific way of saying this is exactly what it's doing for you, and this is exactly why it's making you feel better or perform better, or whatever it is.
So,
or is it different? Is this not wellness at all? Is this something different?
It's different and the same. And I'm so sorry to give you that answer, but here's my conclusion. And again, I'm in a small group of multidiscipline experts looking at this, but we have looked at 50 corporate wellness programs, 50. And we have systematically gone through each wellness program looking for nervous system intelligence, and it's not there. And it's no surprise that it's not there, because as science evolves, we evolve. And as we see more, we can do more. And right now, up until recently, it's been very much neuroscience this, brain friendly this, neuroscience that, and here's psych safety, and here's, and I don't mean to sound a bit eye rolly when I talk about it, but as someone who really needed it throughout most of my career and invested in it and got no results, orange nervous system. No, well, here's what I would say. I would get, and like most people in the orange nervous system bucket, I would get 30% change that would last for a week. And then I would go right back to the original baseline. And it would be so frustrating because I'm like, what? Here's what I used to say like 100 times a month. I know what I'm supposed to do, but I just can't do it. And I said it so much that I wouldn't let myself say it anymore because I was so annoyed. So wellness programs are really important, really important. And when we know more, we can do more. But here's what I would say. The foundation of a wellness program is nervous system intelligence. It's 80% of why we're in the situation we're in and how to change the situation we're in. And when we only use cognitive brain neuroscience, the kind of neuroscience that's wires and circuitry, we're missing out on at least 50% of the solution. So sustainable ongoing change is with and through the nervous system. Neuroscience is important, but it is not the be all and end all. And that is why many wellness programs fall short and don't work, but we don't know what else to do. We want to look after our staff, so we bring in the next wellness program. But if it's not got a nervous system intelligence component to it, the foundation of everything, it's unlikely we're going to have a different experience.
Right. Well, you better stop stalling and start feeding us these 9 items.
I'm going to give you the link to this. So if anyone wants, because I'm just going to read them out.
Yeah,
but
great.
If anyone wants it, it's free. So here's what I would preface it with. Sorry, there's something to create a distinction. One of the things that we came across in the last 5 years is that people would roll their eyes and go, oh, meditation, oh, yoga, it didn't work. And one of the most important takeaways for this stuff is you have to choose the right tool at the right time for your nervous system intensity. And what I mean by that is, and I'm sorry, I'm going to use a science term because I haven't quite figured out a layman version yet. We are either hyper arousal or hypo arousal. And hyper arousal is when the pressure's on, you hit the gas, pedal to the metal, and you move and you get things done. You typically procrastinate until there's so much pressure that you just write the presentation and deliver it the next morning at 9 a.m. If you're a hypo, you are in shutdown and you're dissociated and you're numb and you don't feel anything and you're probably not at work, which is why we prioritize hyper arousal, because hypo is basically ready to collapse. So burnout has definitely happened and you're not getting out of bed. So and in this PDF, we've distinguished between what is hyper arousal and hypo arousal. So I would say this, box breathing. It's what the Navy SEALs do. That's why it's famous, if you will, but it's actually 4,000 years old. Box breathing, 2 minutes a day, 3 times a day for 12 weeks. Box breathing. So what you're doing is you're synchronizing both sides of your nervous system and restoring information and signals to the nervous system that you're good. Because if you can slow breathe for 2 minutes, your nervous system gets interrupted. It's a pattern interrupt for the nervous system. And it's like, wait, we're sitting down breathing for 2 minutes. So we're not in an emergency. There is no fire. Okay. And as we start to train the nervous system that we're not in a fire anymore, because we can sit down and breathe for 2 minutes, 3 times a day, the nervous system starts to respond accordingly. It's called 2 things that change us is neuroplasticity and bioplasticity. And both of those things are optimal when you give them micro moments daily over 12 weeks. So that's box breathing. And there's 3 different types of breath work there. And then sound and vibration. So your nervous system has a very powerful nerve running through it, very powerful nerve. It's cranial nerve 10. also called the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve runs through every organ in the body. So if you have ongoing exposure to stress, that vagal nerve is in collapse. It's crippled. It is going, please give me some water. I haven't drank in 3.5 years. And we don't know. We ignore it. We push through because we're stoic. But if you were to give the vagus nerve 2 minutes a day, 3 times a day of humming, gargling, or a long VOO sound, that specific type of vibration is like water. It's like you're hydrating the vagus nerve and it comes back to life. And it's like, oh my God, it's amazing. And so now it's all been refreshed, if you will. So 2 minutes a day, 3 times a day for 12 weeks, cold water exposure, splashing it on your face, touching the middle of the chest with a cold cloth. Again, 2 minutes a day. This is not a lot of work. It's quite simple stuff here. We have sensory grounding. So the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique. This is if you've just had a really difficult call, or your boss has sent you an email saying, I'd like to talk to you on Monday, but not told you why. And if anyone's listening, don't do that to your staff. Don't do that to them. That is not cool. But if you've got an email from your boss saying, let's chat on Monday with no context, then you're probably freaking out if you're in nervous system orange zone. So a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique is interrupting the nervous system from spiraling into panic mode, because that's what it's been trained to do and has been doing for years. You're interrupting it and saying, okay, here's 5 things that I can see in my environment right now. Here's 4 things that I'm feeling in my body right now. 3 that you can hear, 2 that you can smell, 1 that you can taste. It's in this book. What you're doing is you're interrupting the nervous system's need to spiral and helping it go, oh, wait, we don't have to run for our lives because we have time to sit here and take in the view. And if you give that signal, that information to the nervous system enough, it'll change. Neuroplasticity, bioplasticity. I feel like I'm not going to read out online. I'm just going to give you the PDF and you can share it. Yeah. But the topics are movement, bilateral tapping, orienting, being social, and of course, positive emotion. So I'll spare you the detail.
Great. And we will include a link in the podcast description. So we have a lot of people under a lot of stress. They're able to kind of deal with some of that or correct some of that through what you mentioned there, nervous system intelligence and activities over a reasonably short period of time that help to kind of rebalance them.
Not all of them, but a good few of them, Dan. Like you can change a lot in 12 weeks. It's 12-week increments is how I would describe it.
And what does it look like at the end of 12 weeks, Shannon?
Well, at the end of 12 weeks, I'm just trying to think of some examples that are not always mine. Let me put it this way. I teach and educate and train on this stuff at an industry level. I'm not a practitioner. I'm qualified to be a practitioner, but I'm not a practitioner. So when people come to me and ask me, can I help them with X, Y, or Z? I refer them to practitioners, specifically nervous system restoration practitioners. And here's how this goes. So they're all corporates, lawyers, bankers, regulators, mostly lawyers. So I send them on and I say, give it 12 weeks, work with this person for 12 weeks. And week 8, I get a phone call. And it's almost always with tears running down their cheeks saying, I had no idea that life could be so gentle and so easy. And oh my God, how has it taken me this long to find out? I am sleeping. I have a quality and a quantity of sleep that I've never had before in my life. I have, here was an amazing one. A family that's split right now politically went and did 8, maybe 10 weeks of this stuff and was able to have lunch with her immediate first-degree family members sitting on the opposite end of a political table from her point of view. And it was the best conversation she's ever had with that family member in years, because her nervous system was no longer on fire, running for its life, overreacting to everything, distorting everything. It could just be present and observe other people having different opinions. Like that was given back to her. So your prefrontal cortex, which I referred to earlier as like the adult or the parent part of the brain that can come in and say, hey, probably shouldn't say that. It comes back online. The imagination and the creativity centers of the brain, which are not important if there's a fire, they come back online. They open up. You have much more access to them. The parts of the brain that enjoy relaxing and not feeling guilty about it because you're not working 100 hours a week. That was my big one. That was definitely my big one. It's kind of like, all right, let's go have a day at the beach without the guilt. You know, those things start coming back online and your brain gets a little bit like, holy God, that's all nervous system. I thought that was for me anyway, and I'll speak for myself, I thought that was a way of life that I just had to manage as best I could. I did not know that they were options that I could turn on and off through simply paying attention to my nervous system. So that's how I'd answer your question, Danny.
Good answer. I'm going to wrap up with this one because I know, as you mentioned, a lot of this is quite new, or this way of approaching it is quite new, and it's still under development and construction. But are there any materials out there that people could be directed to that if they're interested and they want to know a little bit more, they might find useful?
Well, yes. So the group that I mentioned earlier, there's a multidisciplinary team of us who are looking at this specific area for corporate business people. It lives on the nervoussystemaconomy.com, nervoussystemaconomy.com. And there's a couple of artifacts on there that are worth looking at. One of them is the organizing principle, where we've mapped the mind-body field of science. And you can see that nervous system intelligence is the organizing principle there, but also the individuals. So you will find the experts in this field, their LinkedIn, their websites, their content, their articles that you can go and check out as and when you see fit. I'm going to give you 2 PDFs now, Danny, to include in your description that will explain a bit more of this. But I would say if you're in the orange part of your nervous system, or if you've resonated with anything I described here, I would say that you want to talk to someone named Roseanne Riley. I would say that Alexandra Kutnick, depending on what part of the world you're in, Amber Johnson. There's a lot of really brilliant people out there sharing some amazing work. You will find them all with and through the nervous system economy, because basically we're promoting the people who are sharing this information through a business lens. There's lots of practitioners out there that will be for moms and children and teenagers and what have you. But I've been looking for 5 years to find the people working in corporate, and there's 12 of us around this table right now. Corporate's not as popular. So I'm trying to genuinely think right now where else I might point someone to. But the truth is, nervous system economy came to life because after 5 years of looking for this material for the corporate world, we couldn't find it. So we made it. We created it. That's how and why it's here.
So nervoussystemaconomy.com.
Yep.
Excellent. Shannon, thank you very much for your time in the podcast. Very interesting, more than that, insightful thoughts and guidance through what you've experienced, and this insight into the nervous system intelligence and how that might play a role in making people feel and perform better, and kind of steps that you can take to do that. Really appreciate your time, Shannon.
Danny, thank you for having me. Like, hand on heart, I appreciate it.
That's all for this episode of the Aquest Podcast. Thank you very much, guys, for listening. The nervoussystemaconomy.com if you're interested in finding out a little bit more about that. And there will be some links in the description to the podcast below. Again, if you're interested in learning a little bit more. In the meantime, we catch you on the next episode.
The Aquest Podcast. Funds Industry Conversations.